Let's get into an end-to-end example of how the system works. What you're viewing right now is the traditional process for how work is identified, how it's planned, how it's scheduled, how it's executed, and then how it's closed. So in a typical industrial operation, an employee would notice that there's an issue. They would fill out a maintenance request. Hey, something's broken. We need to work on it. That request would go into a request queue. It would be triaged by your planner. That planner would pick up the maintenance request, understand if it is a valid request, either create a work order for it or add it to a preventative maintenance plan, then assign it to a technician, and then a scheduler, or they may assign it to a technician and then they may schedule it, or they may just create the work order, not assign a technician, hand it over to a scheduler to assign the technician, then schedule it, and then execute the work. Then a maintenance technician would pick up that scheduled work, look at their daily schedule, see what's on it, pick up a work order, update any items, expenses, and hours that are associated with the work order, and then put it to a closed status. And then the last step would be the financial department to post that work order. And in some of our earlier sessions, we've talked about 25% of our customers have the finance department do the posting of the work order, but about 75% of our customers have the maintenance department do the post and close. The posting is the financial entry into the system that makes the GL entries for items, inventory, expenses, external costs, or labor, how much resource hours went in to doing the work. So today I'm going to show you how we do this within the system, and perhaps I'll even show you some shortcuts of how we do it even faster given the power of the enterprise asset management system. We go back into our browser, into our mining demonstration environment, and I'm going to start at the beginning, which is requests. Just like everything in the system, we can get to requests from the top menu ribbon, the hamburger menu, or I like to put a little bookmark at top to say, hey, I'm going to access requests quite often, so I just have it at the top of my screen. When I click on those requests, it's going to show me a list view of all the requests and their current status. One thing to note about requests within Business Central and within the EAM system is that any user that has a Business Central license, be it a full license or a team member license, can put in requests. Reason why I bring this up is that you can buy a very inexpensive team member license that allows people to put in requests if that's all they do. But this means that anybody that works within Business Central on a day-to-day basis, be it your operations staff, your accounting staff, everybody can put in a request. They don't need to be a licensed EAM user to insert a request into the system. I'm going to go ahead and create a new request. It's going to bring up an asset view of what asset I want to create the request on. If I click the caret next to plant assets, it's going to give me a list view of all of the assets I can create a request for. In this case, I want to create a request for our cyclone. I'm going to scroll through the list until I find my cyclone feed pump. This is the same maintenance request view that would be visible to anybody that had the request permission within Business Central. We can create multiple request groups. So if we wanted to have plant assets versus port assets versus mine assets, you could create different views for those request groups. In this case, I'm just looking at all of the plant assets because that's the request group that I'm assigned to. Scroll down to my cyclone feed pump. Once I have it selected, I can click on Create Request. When you create the request, you'll be expected to give some basic information around the request that you're making. In this case, I'm going to say I've noticed a safety incident on the cyclone feed pump. I've walked by it and I've noticed a burning smell. I'm going to leave the request date as today's date, which happens to be March 22nd. This is the basic information that's needed to create the maintenance request. So what's the request type? Safety, happens to be mechanical, maybe it's an instrumentation, or maybe it's safety. It could even be service. Maybe we need some new grip tape on stairs, for example. So maybe we just need some service. Or maybe it's a safety issue. Maybe it's a broken handrail, or like I put in, a burning smell. When I click on Create Request, it's going to create the entry, but give me the opportunity to add additional details to the request. Walked by the cyclone and smelled it burning. If I'm on a mobile device, I could take pictures, attach it to the maintenance request. If I had a file that's associated with it, let's say I'd written a more detailed narrative about the request, you could attach that onto it. But in this case, I'm just going to give some basic information. We walked by the cyclone today and smelled it burning. When I click Finish, it's done. The maintenance request has now been created. According to our workflow, now the planner would look at the queue of requests, notice that there's something new. Now I need to determine what to do with it. So you'd see my new maintenance request, and it's MRN, maintenance request number 14 has been created, and it gives me the basic information. It's new, here's the request date, what the priority is, and it's a safety related request, and then who initiated the request. When I click into that request, it's going to give me a little bit of information again on what, when, why, where, who. I'm going to triage this and say, okay, there's no open or related work orders to this maintenance request, which is important. A lot of times we have people that will enter the request for the same asset because they've noticed the same thing. Let's say we've already converted one of those into a work order. If we already have a work order open related to this asset and related to this request, we're going to see that in our related work orders tab. If we have additional comments that are in them, we'll see it in the comments section. But for right now, we're just going to look at request details. You walked by the cyclone and smelled it burning. Now, let's say I've triaged this. I've decided that it is an actual request that we need to generate a work order to address. It's very simple to convert this into a work order. On my create related record on my ribbon menu, I can create a work order and register downtime on the asset at the same time. In this case, I'm going to create my work order. When I create the work order, I'm going to give it some basic information. Maybe we have to replace the cyclone because the motor has burned out. I'm going to say the plan date is for today. I'm going to say it's corrective maintenance. I'm going to say, hey, maybe this is high. We need our cyclones to be able to operate. If I want to attach a work order checklist, I can at this time. So a work order checklist can be before, during, and after work order checklist. So what do I want a technician to do before they get started? What I have to do during the execution of work, and what I have to do after my work is done. In this case, maybe I just want them to do a safety pre-work checklist. That safety pre-work checklist is going to walk you through what safety things do I want to do with visual instructions before I get started. So this is according to our safe work procedures. I need to have all of these things before I start work. So I want the technician to fill this out before we start on the work. That's all I'm going to add right now, but if I had work instructions that had already been created for this asset, I could attach the during work instructions. And if I had post instructions, I'm done with the work, I need to clean the area, get it back to normal, you can attach that on as well. But for right now, we're just going to do the before work checklist. When we do that, we're going to create the work order. Any other work order instructions that we want to add, we can add in. Other item that we have within the enterprise asset management system is sometimes we do maintenance work on behalf of a vendor. So let's say we wanted to rebuild this work to a customer that we're doing, or a vendor that we're doing it on behalf. We could make this billable. So let's say this is warranty work that I'm going to rebuild to one of our vendors like Finning. I could switch this to billable so that it will record as a billable work order so that we can charge that to a vendor if we need to. In this case, we're not going to. But let's say I've, as a scheduler or planner, I've gone into the field, I've taken additional pictures, or I have additional work orders instructions. You can, again, add additional documents or additional pictures to that work order. Because we're going to go from the planning directly into the scheduling side of it, I am going to open my work order. But if I was just doing the planning functions and not the scheduling functions, this would be the end of my job as a planner. And so I would just click finish. But we're going to go right into the scheduling component. So let's go ahead and click open. When we open this work order, it's going to give us all of the information about the request at the very bottom. So it's going to say, hey, this work order was generated from request number 14. It's associated to a burning smell. It's a safety request type. It's a new request, and Andy was the person that submitted it. An important thing to know about requests and work orders is that the person that implemented or requested the work will get notification via email when the work order status changes. So when a request is converted into a work order, they get a notification that the request is turned into a work order. You can select the type of notifications that you want to give to the end user. Let's say we want the end user to know every time there's a status change. You can adjust the system to send that requester every time there is a status change on the work order. Because we're just in the planning phase right now, we don't need to do that. Our user was already notified that the request was turned into a work order. So what do I need to do now to schedule this out? I need to give it some resources. And again, our customers typically have the planning and scheduling function that's fully integrated. So that's why I'm wearing kind of both hats, is that I'm going to plan and schedule. So this is work order number 11. I need to add a resource or a work type. Let's say I don't know who's going to do the work yet, but I know what type of work it's going to be. So let's say I'm just going to say we're going to replace the cyclone. So this is going to be a mechanical work order. And let's say I know that it's going to take about 5 hours to do that work. I'm going to give the mechanical work type code 5 hours to execute on this work. If I had specific skills that I needed to execute on this work, let's say I needed somebody with welding skills to maybe cut the bolts off the cyclone, I could add those skills to the work order as well. If I was scheduling it directly to an individual resource, I could see if the resource had the skills to be able to execute that type of work by checking the skills of the worker. You could also have multiple work types if you wanted. We could have mechanical, electrical, instrumentation on the same work order if that was required for us to do so. Those work types can happen at different dates and times. It's not necessary for them to all be executed on the same date. So let's say I want the mechanical part of this work to be done today. I could say there is an electrical part of work. Scroll back a little bit. I could say that there is an electrical piece of work that also needs to be done, and that'll take 2 hours. And let's say that's going to happen on Saturday when we have the next availability for a technician. So you can see quite easily we can have multiple work types on the same work order executing on multiple days. If I scroll down, if I know there's asset items that I need, so think about it as materials that I need to execute my job, I can click on the Add Asset Items. So if this specific asset, which happens to be our cyclone, has a bill of materials associated with it, it's going to show me the list of items that are only associated to this specific asset. In this case, we're going to, maybe we've discovered that it's the impeller that's gone bad, so that's what we're going to replace. I can then click on impeller, add that, say I need one of those, and I can consume that as part of my work order. You can also do it by location. So let's say you have multiple warehouses on your site. Maybe you have availability in your east warehouse, and maybe you don't have availability in your east warehouse. Maybe it's in your west warehouse. You can go into detail. If you show the details of this, you can actually go in to see what is available in that east warehouse. This shows you where the warehouse is. But let's say we want to go in and look at our asset items. We want to see availability of stock. When we go into that, we can look at our items. It'll show you what the inventory, so how many I have available in stock, in inventory. And if I want to look at that by warehouse, I can look at advanced view, and then it's going to switch the view to include the warehouse that it's available in. So it makes it easy for technicians to be able to find the part that they need, add it directly to the work order if I'm going to consume it. If I have expenses that I need to put on the work order, so let's say I need a vendor to come in and help me from the outside to be able to execute on this specific work, I could add those to this work order as well. So let's say I need some external repair help. This external repair help happens to already be tied to a vendor, and it looks like they have a minimum quantity of 10. Normally, before I engage with an external vendor, I know what the costs are by hour. In this case, I know that they charge $150 an hour. So I'm saying that we have 10 hours with an external vendor that we need in order to execute on this work order. So I've done the basic planning on this work order. What we can do now is we can go and release it. And then let's go and look at our scheduling board. So we didn't schedule this to an individual person. We've left it open from a resource standpoint, but we have added the amount of hours that are going to go into it. We've added an item that we're going to consume as part of the work order, and we've added some external repairs that we're going to have as part of this work order. So we're going to change our work order status to ready. So this is ready to be executed on. Now let's switch over to our scheduling view so we can schedule this. Let's go into our resource scheduling board and schedule some work now. Across the top, you'll see our ribbon bar gives us all of the options. So maybe we want to see capacities for our maintenance technicians. When we click on that, it's going to show you the total available time by technician to be able to schedule. Maybe you want to look at progress across the bottom of each work order. We've got a little progress indicator in white. So if we're maybe 50% through a work order, that's going to show in blue, 50% done. But we really just want to focus on this work order 11 that we need to add to a specific resource that's going to execute the work. So I'm going to expand my capacities, and I see that Andy's got plenty of time to be able to execute on this work order today. So it's as simple as dragging and dropping that work order to Andy. And you can see that when I do that, it's going to fill up the capacity or the hours that are required by the work order for Andy to do that work. You can see that on the 23rd is when I've scheduled the second part of this work order, which is the electrical piece. But if I scroll down my capacity list, I see I don't have any capacity for this work order to be done on the 23rd. So let's assign this to Catherine on a different day. Let's take and go, okay, let's give this to Catherine. Let's give it to Catherine on Monday, the 25th. So now I've actually changed the resource and I've changed the execution date. Once I've committed these to the schedule by dragging and dropping them, I want to go back and show you what happened to the actual work order. Let's go out of our resource scheduling board really quick, and let's go back into our active work order and active work order number 11. Remember before, when we planned this work and we added quantities of times, we didn't have individual resources listed. Now we do. We've used our visual planning board to assign resources to the work order. And remember, originally we had said we wanted to get this date done. We wanted to get the electrical work done on the 23rd, but we didn't have any capacity on the 23rd. So we changed it to the 25th. So I wanted to show you the linkage between the visual scheduling board and what can happen when you actually assign that work to individual resources. Okay, let's go look at this from a technician's view standpoint. I'm going to adjust my role center, and I'm going to switch to an asset technician. So now I've put my hat on where I'm going to go and execute the work. It's been from a request, it's been through planning, it's been through scheduling, and now I'm ready to execute on that work order. So you'll see from within the asset technician view, it's got more of a streamlined view, and I'm only looking at work that's assigned to me. And I've got work order number 11 that's assigned to me right now. So you can see only the things that are assigned to me within this view. Let's say I'm ready to start executing on this work. I can flip this status to in progress. When it's in progress, actually, I made a mistake and the system just told me. Before I start the work, I need to complete my checklist. So let's say I'm going to start the job. I need to do my checklist first. This is my pre-work checklist. So do I have a hard hat? Do I have safety boots? Do I have high flex gloves? Do I have safety glasses? My coveralls? Do I have my back brace or my respirator that's required? You'll notice that anything with a red asterisk by it is a required. I can't skip that. But let's say I have some other information that doesn't have an asterisk on it. It means this is optional. I'm going to go ahead and fill it out. Hey, the conditions in my workplace are good. Yes. Am I working properly? Of course. And I'm going to say no. Can I continue to work safely? Yes. And then once I'm done with this, I can either save the progress or I can go ahead and submit it. I'm going to submit it. I've done my safety pre-work. It's going to thank me. And from there, I can change the work order to in progress. Let's say that I am going to execute on the work that I'm doing right now. I can go and consume the item, the impeller that's already added. Let's say I go to the warehouse and I picked up that item. So I'm going to post the consumption on that impeller. I've just used this on the work order. So I'm going to post that I've used it, which means, hey, it's already part of this work order. I've consumed it now. And let's say I'm ready to consume the hours. So, hey, it's only took me 2.5 hours of the 5 hours that's allotted. I can now say, hey, I'm going to post that consumption. So now I've got 2.5 hours that are committed. I've got 2.5 hours that are left, but I've only used half that. That's important because a lot of times we plan and schedule, but we want to know what it actually took to execute on that work. You can see we've added some manual time, but let's say I want to do down to the minute of the work that I'm doing. I can click on Start Timer. This allows us to record down to the second of how long it takes us to execute the work. So we planned for there to be 5 hours, but if we really want to have some detailed analytical information on how long it takes to execute work, there are timers per individual work order. This is not something that we typically see when we're operating within the mill. It's not something that we typically see when we're operating within the mine, but this is something that you typically see when you're doing bay type maintenance on mobile assets, where we're going to start a work order timer to see exactly how much wrench time it takes beginning to end. So if you're interested in the detail, we have timers that can be added by technician to be able to record the exact time it takes. So when I click stop and post, it's going to create an entry in the system that will give you exactly how much has been done on this work order. In this case, 2.5244 hours, if we want to get that detailed. If I've completed all of the work on this work order, we can now change this from in progress to completed. So we've completed all of our work. We've done our part. Maybe we don't want to close it just yet because Catherine still needs some work that she has to do. Maybe we need the external repairs to be done. But for the most part, Andy has completed his work. He's determined that nothing else needs to be done. I can now close this work order. Remember at the bottom under the maintenance request details, as the statuses change in the work order, if I've optioned to, the requester will get an email letting them know the status update on the work order as it changes. So it becomes very flexible to be able to plan, schedule, and be able to add detailed time information onto a work order before you close it. One other thing I'd like to point out is that as a work technician, it's often helpful if we have our parts waiting for us at the warehouse when it's time. We now have built-in pick lists, so we can actually send a pick ticket to the warehouse to pick the items, in this case, the impeller associated with the work order, so it's waiting for me when I go to execute the work. So we've gone through the planning, we've gone through the scheduling on our work order. Let's go through and close out the project now that it's completed. I'm going to switch back over in my settings from Asset Technician into Asset Manager, just to put on a different hat. I'm going to go into that active work order. I replace the cyclone. And I'm going to close this work order, and I'm just going to say everything's done. So when I say close, it's going to go through everything, then change the work order status to close. Now, that work order is not posted yet because we need to put our finance hat on, go in, make sure all of the items, the expenses and the hours have the correct financial treatment. And then I can click that post button, which is then going to make the entry into the system for the impeller that I used on the job. It's going to make the entry into the system for the hours that I consumed on the job. And it's going to make the entry in the system for the expenses that I have on the job. But you see, once I've switched that work order to close, it's going to disappear from my active work orders grid. Now, that's just one process within the system to give you a general overview of how we go through a request, how we plan, how we schedule, how we execute, and how we close that work order. There are multiple types of work orders within the system. One of the other ones I want to talk about is our round plan. Round plans are super important to our customers. It's kind of a lost art to go to the shop floor, to walk through a whole set of assets, to look, see what's going on, listen, hear what's going on, even smell what's happening on your factory floor. Rounds plans allows us to create a route through the operation to do those inspections on those assets. You could even do a route to do service oiling, for example, or service lubrication if you wanted to. This is a work order that allows us to address multiple assets on the same round plan, whereas work orders are normally associated to an individual asset. So this is something that we want to do that has coverage over a group of assets. So let's do a quick round plan and show you how that works. This is going to be this is automatically assigned, so this is round order plan 2. And I'm going to say it's a daily plant inspection. I'm going to give it a category. This is going to be an inspection category. I'm going to give it a priority. I'm going to say this is medium. It's important to walk the factory floor, the plant floor on a regular basis. I'm going to say this is going to happen. We don't need a location code on it. What we're going to do is now select assets that we want to be on this round order plan. If I click on assets, let's just say I want a specific asset to be inspected. Let's go in the category code and say, I want everything with a electrical, everything that's within the mill. Let's say I only want it to be an active asset. Let's look at all of the assets that meet those criteria. When I click OK, it's going to give me 128 assets that are in the mill that have an electrical component. So these are all of the assets that are going to be part of my round order plan. Now, I probably should tell them what they need to do. So I'm going to say on a daily basis, so if we click on frequency, let's click on our reoccurrent schedule. This is going to be a calendar-based reoccurrent schedule. And if I click on the ellipsis next to reoccurrent schedule, I can see these can be daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly. In this case, I want all of the electrical related gear to be inspected on a daily basis. But let's say I only want to happen till the end of the month because I want guys to go and look at everything that's happening for the next 4 or 5 days because we've had quite a few problems. So let's go and look at it every day. So one day in between for kind of the next week. When I do that, it's going to say this is going to happen on a calendar-based frequency daily from today until the end of the month. You'll notice there's not a current round order number because we haven't released this plan yet. We're still planning it. This is something that's going to happen regularly. I need to give some resources to this round order plan. They're going to do the work. We know who's going to do this work because Lena always does it. So we're going to have Lena do this. She's our main electrician. So it's going to be electrical, and it's going to take her quite a while. So it's going to take her 6 hours a day to get through this work order plan. We're not going to get this round order plan. We're not going to give any items because we just want her to go through and look at all of these assets and inspect them. So this is really about, hey, let's go look at some specific assets. Let's make sure that they're operating correctly. Let's make sure they're in good working order, but let's go and view those assets. So I've added these assets onto the plan. And then normally you would do, in more advanced environments, there's a two-step process. You would release the plan and then you would calculate it. Releasing it means it's ready for scheduling. Calculating actually generates the work order. In this case, we've had the system to calculate the plan upon release. So we do it, say create new work order, say okay. When we do that, it's going to tell us that one plan was calculated and one work order or round plan was made. And you'll see now on our round plan, it's going to tell me that the current round order number is 2. So let's go look at that round order plan. So now I've got my round order plan that I can execute against. And we can have checklists on these round order plans now to have specific work that we want to have done as part of these round order. So maybe we want people to, as they go around to each individual asset, maybe we just want them to, again, do a visual inspection of every single asset. So we can specify what we want them to do as part of this. If we're going to go execute on this as well, we can go asset by asset. We can add asset defects if we want as part of this inspection. The nice thing about this is that it gives you information on inspecting all of these individual assets on a single work order. It's the ability to collect asset defect information on all of those assets from a single round plan. So it's very, very powerful from an inspection standpoint for you to go and inspect all of those assets. Let's say I've done them or I've skipped. You can mark them all as done. You can skip. You can have individual remarks on those assets if you want. Again, we can have really detailed work instructions or checklists that give you all of the information about what you've seen as part of the round order plan. And if you need items, like let's say you have some cleaning gear or something that you've used, or maybe a valve or something that you've just done a quick repair as part of your inspection, you could do that. Some people get in trouble for doing repairs as part of inspections, but what this does is allow you to do that round, see percentage complete, record any defects, any remarks on these assets, and then be able to convert those inspection details into work orders based on those individual assets. So one of the key differences between a work order plan and a round order plan is that the work order plan is meant for an individual asset and round order plans are meant for multiple assets. One of the last types of work order that I want to share with you is we've gone through the planning, the scheduling process, we've gone through the rounds work orders, but one of the things we always get asked is, hey, we get people that walk into our office all the time that just need work done. They don't have time to put in a request. They just come in and say, hey, the cyclone is broken. We've created in the system a one-off work order capability. That one-off work order capability is a fast way to create a work order. In about 30 seconds, we can select the asset, say that it's broken, say it's a safety issue, maybe it's emergency, create the work order, open it, scroll down to our resource, schedule it directly to somebody, mechanical, give them a couple of hours. There, we've created a work order and we've already planned it for the date. So in less than a minute, we're able to create a one-off work order, immediately be able to go in and schedule that or see that it's already scheduled very, very easily. Let's go into our resource scheduling board and be able to see very, very easily that the work can now be executed on. So one-off work orders, round plans, and work order plans. We've showed you the steps that you take from request to converting that into a work order, adding some items, adding some expenses, adding some resources, going through that scheduling process. So assigning it to an individual on our resource scheduling board, and then executing that work, posting and closing it. One other view of the resource scheduling board is, again, the asset activity board. So let's say you wanted visibility into what work was being done by what assets. This is a different view of your work that is being executed within the system that just shows it to you by asset. So in this case, it's just limiting it down to the assets that have work orders against them within this period view, but you could view all assets if you wanted to within the system. So just two different views of how work is being executed within the system.